Now, in the book, you draw linkages all through the book between governance and economics, and that dates back thousands of years. It dates, like you mentioned, Cholas, Pandyas, Pallavas, Vijayanagara kingdoms. Explain to us the linkage between governance and economics in these kingdoms and how it continued for centuries.
Right. So in very, again, simple terms, right? We have the state in general, and then we have the market, right? These are two sort of pillars of what you call modern economic thinking, right? The state is basically governments which give, they earn revenue from taxation, they invest in infrastructure, they stimulate the economy in various forms. And then there's the market. So the market sort of, works on its own terms. And then there is competition, and then it produces bigger entities, companies, and things like that, and drives the economy. The role of Dharma is sort of a foundational thing as viewed through these kingdoms, as sort of a foundational thing which enables both of these to work really well.
So there was welfare state but free trade.
Correct.
And there was this blend. That's what it seems from reading your book.
Right.
A
Right.
mix of the two, right?
Right, definitely. So if you look at it, like there was, because essentially all these are all political players, right? I mean, they're all, even though they were monarchs and they had, a lot of power, they had to keep their, populace quite happy, because that's where the welfareism really comes in. Because they want to ensure that the lower halves of sections of society were always sort of not overwhelmed, or they had to be taken care of. So they had a sort of a welfarist approach where they ensure that poorer sections of people are supported through a variety of these schemes, or something similar to, I would say direct benefit transfer types.
In spite of wars being fought.
Correct. And that's the fascinating thing, right? If you really look at this period during this common era kingdoms, all these guys, I mean, the Cholas, Pallavas, Pandyas, all of them are fighting with each other in some form or the other during various phases. But one thing that was sort of common is that their economic prosperity was something the underlying economic prosperity was going on fairly well. Because if you look at the early common era period, most of the world's sort of GDP and GDP per capita, India and China were the top countries in the world. So that's why you see that a lot of the action was around the maritime trade in the Indian Ocean, because that's where the game was. And because most of the Middle Eastern trade, this was a sort of a segue to both the rest of Asia and from the Middle East. So that's why, for example, the Cholas had a lot of their ports on the southern coast, and they were sort of transient trades. I mean, let's take Singapore, for example, right? So Singapore is sort of a central place which takes you to the rest of Asia for a lot of commerce to happen. But much of commerce doesn't really happen in Singapore because it's a very small place, right? Similarly, in a lot of the ports that the Cholas had, it was a lot of these transient ports. But they played a very important role to ensure that the trade and commerce was happening. So it was something that, despite the wars, despite a lot of geopolitical tensions, I think the principles that these kingdoms had, in my view, were all based on some level of dharmic-based economic frameworks. And I think that helped to sort of look beyond the political environment.
So the trade that was happening, the trade routes, all this happened while these wars were happening. The wars were happening within the framework of the subcontinent.
Correct.
Whereas when they traded with modern day Vietnam, Cambodia, or you want to call it Kambuja, whatever you want to call it, or Thailand, right up till Java that you're talking about, the wars didn't go there.
Yeah.
Only the trade happened, cultural linkages happened, religiosity and religious linkages happened, but the wars didn't expand there.
Yeah, and also when people conquered, right, it's very important to understand. Let's take the example of Cholas, right? We all know that Rajendra Chola, which is Rajaraja Chola's son, he went across Southeast Asia and conquered or had battles in many of these places. Kadaram, which is Kedah now, is one of the sort of known places. But there's a reason why the Cholas did not rule these places.
Yeah.
See, once you go all the way till Southeast Asia, logically you should go and rule there for some time, right?
Yeah.
Because the underpinning reason behind, one of the reasons behind the conquest, for example, was to do with the guilds that I spoke about, the Shrenis that I spoke about.
Huh.
So there was a guild called Ainurvar. In Tamil, it means 500. The Ainurvar was actually started in Karnataka but it expanded a lot during the Cholas. But it was one of the biggest guilds of those time. They played an important role in financing the Cholas and a much bigger political role. So they were trading. So they had entities across Southeast Asia. So they were trading, and China was one of their major destinations for trade. So they were going through, again, the Singaporean Straits of Malacca belt.
Malacca,
And there what happens is the Srivijaya kingdom, which was ruling the contemporary Sumatra, Indonesia. So they had a sort of a tiff with them, where they were not allowing these guilds to trade. On top of it, the Cambodian king at that time was also in touch with the Cholas, and he had some geopolitical conflicts with the Srivijaya kingdom. And this led Rajendra Chola to go and conquer, so that, one, the trading routes were cleared, so that they could, go through. And then the geopolitical alliances that he had with a lot of these kings were also sort of sustained. So that led them to conquer and move. So what I'm trying to say is war and conquering was not the primary motive, right? Cultural exchange became a natural sort of extension of it.
extension of trade.
Yeah, extension of trade. I'll give you another example, right? So in Kamboja Desa itself, Kamboja Desa is basically what I call Kamboja Desa is contemporary Cambodia, but in the post-Funan period. So when I'm talking about post-Funan period, it's about early CE, say about till about 6th century CE.
Geographically larger than what Cambodia is today.
Correct. A bit larger, much larger than what it is today. So during that period, one of the theories is how sort of these Hindu civilizations came about that is, one theory is that a Vedic Brahmin from Kanchipuram, from a Pallava lineage called Kaudanya, he traveled all the way to Cambodia for trade, and then he marries a local prince called Soma. And then they, start a family and they start this kingdom, right? And that's how this is one of the theories which says that that's how this lineage began.
Like what happened with Korea,
Correct.
The princess from Ayodhya.
Correct.
There. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is a lot of common linkages of people who keep moving around for a variety of these reasons were happening, irrespective of the geopolitical element. And that led to a sort of a transfer of knowledge and transfer of culture as an extent. And that became a permanent presence.
Do subscribe to the ANI Clips channel to get shorter versions of this podcast. Click here to watch the full episode.